Let's talk about polymer clay safety, specifically storing polymer clay. You want to avoid storing uncured clay into hard plastic containers because, believe it or not, unclear clay can melt plastic, not to the degree of aliens where the alien saliva melts into the metal. In reality, you might end up with some sticky goo in your container, or the clay might seem to be stuck to the plastic, but now you know what the heck that is should that happen. You might be wondering, Jenny Fu, why doesn't it melt the plastic that contains the clay? Well, I'm glad you asked. Uncured clay is incompatible with specific types of plastic. The plastics that have a recycling number of 2, 4, and 5 are usually fine for storage, and you want to steer clear of plastics number 6 and 7. When in doubt, you can test it out by storing a small piece of clay in the container for 1 or 2 days to see if the plastic of the container softens a little bit or gets a bit sticky. One of the most convenient and cost-effective ways to store polymer clay is to place them in little plastic sandwich bags and then label them for easy identification. I like to write the brand name and color mixture with a Sharpie onto the bag, and then house all the little bags of the same brand into an even larger bag. Also, you can wrap your clay into plastic wrap that isn't polystyrene and store it in any container. It's also best practice to never leave uncured clay sitting around on unprotected surfaces for long periods of time because it can get very bored, as well as painted, varnished, or lacquered surfaces. Improper storage can ruin the clay or damage objects in your home that are made out of wood or plastics. This is because polymer clay is bound together by what's called plasticizer, which is a chemical that makes plastics soft and flexible. This is also the reason why it may not play well with other plastics. There will be no furniture abuse here. Once the clay is baked, however, it is inert and chemically inactive and therefore cannot harm your furniture. Is polymer clay food safe? Can you eat from objects made from polymer clay? While polymer clay is rated as non-toxic, you can't eat or drink from it. So no, it is not certified for food contact. Nor can you borrow things from your kitchen for clay usage, and I'll get to why that is in a minute. Cured polymer clay is very porous, and bacteria can use that as a breeding ground if food particles get stuck in pores, nooks, crannies, and it's almost impossible to clean it after using it with food. Polymer clay is made for craft use, not as a food utensil, so it's not going to withstand sanitization methods like using hot water or disinfecting liquids, and it'll break down after repeatedly using it in a dishwasher. Another reason why baked clay should not come into contact with your food is that residual plasticizers can remain on the clay surfaces even after firing. However, you can use it to decorate food serving pieces where it doesn't touch the food directly. Now let's talk about clay safety with tools. If you take something from your kitchen and use it with clay, it should remain craft or clay dedicated. Be sure to keep it out of the kitchen or maybe even label it so that nobody accidentally uses it with food. This is because it's near impossible to remove all the clay particles from some utensils like pasta machines where it hides in the nooks and crannies, and plasticizers from the clay can remain on porous surfaces like plastic. However, if you must and it's a non-porous surface like glass and metal, and you can effectively sanitize it, then you could probably clean it well enough for food use. Sanitizing after working with craft clay. After working with clay, there's usually some residue on your hands that soap and water will not be able to remove. There are various products that you can use to dissolve the clay on your hands and then follow with water and ordinary dish soap. You could rub on some hand sanitizer to dissolve some of the clay residue. Another option is to use a pumice-based waterless hand cleaner. If you don't have that, rubbing alcohol is another option that's really good with dissolving clay. And a more gentler option is to take some olive oil and rub that in between your hands to break up the clay particles. After dissolving the clay with any of the methods that I mentioned above, follow with soap and water to finish cleaning it all off, especially before you prepare food and eat. Now let's talk about safety when baking polymer clay. When baking polymer clay, you never want to leave your clay unattended. If the clay appears to be smoking or burning, turn off the oven, remove the clay, place it outdoors until cool, and ventilate the room. You want to avoid baking clay at really high temperatures at around 350 degrees because it gets really close to burning the nearer you get to that temperature. If you're unsure if your clay is completely baked all the way, you can get away with baking the clay for longer periods of time, or even raising the temperature 10 to 15 degrees higher than the recommended settings. In fact, that can help strengthen your clay. However, be wary of temperature fluctuations that can occur with inexpensive ovens. When baked as directed, the fumes are not toxic. However, at really high temperatures, when it starts to burn, it releases hydrogen chloride, which can cause eyes, nose, or mouth irritation. Different brands will have different baking times, but from what I've seen, it ranges from 212 to 300 degrees Fahrenheit. Polymer clay and protective gear. While carving, dry sanding, machine buffing, or drilling clay, wear safety goggles and wear a dust mask. You certainly don't want to pop your eye out. A piece of clay went flying off the buffer at a really high speed. Buffing or sanding can produce very fine particles that can get into your lungs or eyes. Instead of dry sanding, you could opt for wet sanding, which not only prevents airborne dust, but also minimizes the appearances of scratch marks on your clay. That's it. Thanks for watching till the very end. If this was helpful, please give it a thumbs up and feel free to subscribe if you want to learn more about polymer clay and see future videos on creative DIYs. With that, good luck with your next project.